Everybody's awake.
Giants.
Here.
Maybe. Here. Jason's not.
Here. All right, we do have a quorum. First item on the agenda is to consider approval of the minutes of July 26, 2022 meeting. Discussion, I'll be looking for a motion.
July 26th.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Motion carries. First item on the agenda, public hearing for case number 03RZ 2022, Cushman Farms PUD, continued from the August 30th meeting. If you would make a note, any of the Alex is.
So the first case here on tonight's agenda is one that was considered continued from the last meeting. This is the Cushman Farms PUD. The applicant on this project is Pyatt Builders, and the owner of the property is E&P Farm LLC. It is about a 41-acre site west of 200 West and south of North Vernon Lane. And the current zoning on the property is residential 3.5. And the developer is seeking to rezone it to planned unit development. As an overview, the housing that they're proposing would contain 97 single-family residential lots. And that would amount to about 2.37 dwelling units per acre in terms of density. The common area, the open space they're showing is about 12 acres, which represents about 29% of the property. The minimum lot width would be 65 feet, but it would still be 80 feet along the north and east property line. And then the town's comprehensive plan does show this site as agricultural. We'll go into some more of the development standards detailing that they're proposing. So here's the property here. You can see that it's basically being carved out from the larger Cushman property. It's just south of the Alford subdivision, west of 200 West, and west of the new Mount Vernon North subdivision. And then, of course, to the south is the Mount Vernon School District campus. If we take a look at the comprehensive plan map that was last done in 2014, you can see here the area outlined in red. It is shown as agricultural on the future use map. If we take a look at the zoning map, you can see that the town limits in this area are a little bit odd, but this particular property is within the town limits. Anything that you see within the black line means that it's in town limits. So this property today, anything that you see in that kind of beige color is R3.5. Properties to the west are residential 1.0 in the county, as is the subdivision to the north and some of the lots along 200 West. And then the Mount Vernon North subdivision also has a county with their own unique development standards. If we take a look at the concept plan that is part of the PUD, you can see that the larger lots are on the boundary of the property in orange. Those are the 80-foot wide lots, and then the 65-foot wide lots are the yellow. You can always come back to this as necessary, of course. Here's some of the concept renderings for the housing product that was intended in the subdivision. And we can always come back to these just to give you an overview of what they're looking to accomplish. All right, so the developer, it should be stated that the developer has the right to develop the property under the basic R 3.5 development standards and the subdivision control ordinance that's in place today. And essentially, in exchange for smaller lots, the developer is willing to commit to higher standards as part of the PUD zoning. Some standards, all have been agreed to by the developer, are likely the most detailed and stringent standards in the Indianapolis metropolitan area, and I think the developer can attest to that. The project is based on the town's PUD standards template. And that template was developed by a committee of town council members, residents, and staff. It was adopted by the council via ordinance in 2017. And select alternatives to the standards that are outlined in that document may be considered by the Fortville Town Council, but in no way should the resulting development be of a lesser quality than intended in the outline. And to give you an example, some of the projects that have been approved since implementation of those PUD standards, the template would be Park Creek, the Davis Homes project out here, Northwest Fortville by David Weekly Homes and Ryan Homes, which is under construction right now, Mount Vernon North, PR Horton, which is near this property, and then Byers Estates by Althoff Homes, which is east of Fortville Pike. So I'm going to try to give a quick rundown of the different development topics as part of the analysis, how the proposed PUD standard compares with what the basic R 3.5 zoning or what's shown in the subdivision control ordinance for the town would be if they were to go that route. So, so first, in terms of density, about 2.4 dwelling units per acre is what they're proposing. In the zoning ordinance for the basic standard R 3.5 zoning, which is today, it's not really prescribed, but it's approximately 3.96 dwelling units per acre based on a minimum lot size of 11,000 square feet. Now you still have to provide retention or contention areas. So the resulting density would probably end up being a little bit lower anyway. But if we take a look at minimum lot width, what they're proposing, as I mentioned, is a 65-foot minimum with the 80-foot along the north and east property lines. Minimum in our 3.5 zoning is 80 feet across the board. Minimum lot depth for these lots would be 125 feet. That compares with roughly 137.5 feet, which would be in 3.5 zoning. The minimum lot square footage for this project is 8125 as compared to the minimum lot size in that zoning district of 11,000 square feet. Impervious service, which is the footprint of the building and indicated areas, is a little bit higher, in this case at 50% max as opposed to 40%. And then for the minimum home size, in our 3.5 zoning, it's only 1,100 square feet. For this particular project, they're proposing 1,500 square feet for a single story, 2,100 square feet for a two-story, with at least 900 on the first floor of that second, of that two-story building. Front setbacks with this project would be, the proposal is a little bit shallower than what's typically allowed in basic R 3.5 zoning. So they're looking at 25 instead of 35. Side setback is a little bit narrower at 9 feet. It can go down to 7 feet if they have a third car garage there. And that's down from 10 feet, which is otherwise required. Rear setback would match at 20 feet. In fact, their standard is a little bit more stringent. They would have 30 feet along the north and the east property line. In terms of the local street right-of-way, it matches whether it was straight zoned or in this line it's 55 feet. So that would include a 7.5-foot wide street tree planting area between the curb and the sidewalk. And then the width of the street would match the town standards at 29 feet back to curb to back to curb. In terms of sidewalks and paths, it is in either scenario, they'd have to have 5-foot concrete sidewalks, but in this project, they are adding an asphalt walking path through the common area, which isn't otherwise required. In terms of the garage requirement, the proposed PUD standard is that a 2-car garage with windows, 2-car garage cannot exceed 50% of the front elevation. And this does not apply, the 50% rule does not apply to 3-car garages. In the standard zoning ordinance, it's be a 2-car garage with windows, and garages cannot exceed 50% of the front elevation period. In terms of exterior materials, they are proposing to prohibit vinyl. Vinyl siding is allowed in R 3.5. They are also looking to do freeze boards along the soffits and 3-foot masonry on corner lots if masonry is used on the front. As it relates to R 3.5, there's no requirement for freeze boards, no corner lot masonry is required. It does say that 50% masonry is required on the front elevation unless an architectural style is utilized where masonry is not typically utilized. For the exterior window trim and overhangs, they'll do 1x4 trim instead of 1x6. And they would be providing a 12-inch roof overhang, which is greater than the 9-inch roof overhang that's otherwise allowed. Architecturally appropriate shutters would be required in this project, not required by the zoning ordinance. In terms of porches, for this project, all homes would need to have a covered entrance, stoop, or a porch. No such requirement under basic zoning on that. And then for rear articulation, or basically how they're going to break up the back plane of the home, in this project, they're proposing that the rear of all homes to the north, east, and west perimeter, plus a few others, as indicated by the exhibit in the PUD, shall have a wall plane recess or projections, and those examples can include a sunroom, a screened porch, covered patio, or room extension. And there's no such requirement for any of that in our 3.5 zoning. See, window distribution. It's a little bit different from what our 3.5 zoning is prescribed. In terms of anti-monotony or variation, architectural variation throughout the neighborhood, what they're proposing is more stringent than what our code would otherwise allow. In terms of landscaping that's adjacent to existing residential development, there is no requirement in the basic zoning ordinance for that. For this project, they're looking to do evergreen trees that are 6 to 7 feet tall every 20 feet. Again, along that north and east side of the property. In terms of front yard trees, for this project, street trees would be required between the sidewalk and the curb, and there's no requirement for a front yard tree. That'd be optional. The code would require 3 trees in the front yard. For the front yard, sod is technically required in our 3.5 zoning. They're looking to do in this case either sod, hydro seed, or slice seed. The shrubs, very similar to the landscape package that they're proposing, basically very similar to the shrubs for this project as it would be for straight zoning. It's 810 shrubs. In terms of open space, there's a pretty significant difference between the basic zoning and between what they're proposing. So their proposal is at 29%, and the code only requires a minimum of 6% open space. In terms of amenities for the project, they're providing a play structure, a walking path that's required. No such requirements under basic zoning. Last few items are streetlights. That we're placing those at each intersection and intermediate locations, not to exceed 400 feet. And those lights would have to be fully shielded and point downward. Under our current ordinance, Only intersections are required, and those lights are not required to be fully shielded or point downward. Second from the last, in terms of home exterior lighting, 2 dusk to dawn lights would be provided in the garage. And on the front porches or the stoops, they provide recessed can lights on a photocell. Under basic zoning, light required near entry only. And then lastly, for a police and school donation, they are providing $50 each per home. And they're to each entity, and there's no such requirement in the zoning ordinance for that. So hopefully that gives you an idea as to the different variations that they're proposing. So since this is a rezone, the planning commission and the council for that matter is required to at least consider different items as part of their decision. It's not necessarily binding, but it needs to be part of the consideration process. So the first one is this project consistent with the comprehensive plan? I'd say no and yes. Clearly, if you look at the map, it identifies this area as agricultural, so it's not consistent with that. However, in terms of the text of the plan, it is across the street from an existing higher quality subdivision, and newer subdivision in the comprehensive plan also, quote, encourages the development of high quality housing. Second item is this consistent with the current conditions and character of the current structures? The property itself is currently undeveloped farmland. However, new proposed housing would be consistent with the new zoning. So obviously the rezone today wouldn't be consistent with the current zoning, but it would be upon development, which is pretty typical for this question. Third item is it consistent with the most desirable use of land? Stringent development standards would ensure a high quality residential neighborhood. It is adjacent to an existing neighborhood, so I say yes on that. Number 4, is it consistent with conservation of property values? I say yes, that the stringent development standards established in the PUD will help to ensure high property values. And then number 5, is this consistent with responsible growth and development? My professional recommendation would be yes, that it's near an existing neighborhood and of high quality. In terms of remonstrance on the property of this project, I should say, I don't believe we've received any letters, but obviously there are a number of people in the room that will have the opportunity to speak. I know I've heard that there's been some concerns about loss of farmland and views. There's been concerns about traffic. And should be noted that construction and traffic, it will be prohibited to the Alfords neighborhoods to the north. That was written into the PUD based on some concerns we've heard from various folks. Certainly that's not an exhaustive list. There may be other concerns that the nearby residents have. In terms of the staff recommendation, my recommendation would be to provide a positive recommendation to Fortville Town Council. And then the next step in the process, and this time is always subject to change, it's tentative. It would go to the Fortville Town Council for review, first reading, and they could approve it on first reading. It'll be tentatively Tuesday, September 7th at 7 p.m. With that, I'd be more than happy to address any questions that you might have on the project. Now the developer is here as well. Thank you.
Okay, from the committee, any questions for Adam here on the outset?
So I just want to clarify one thing. So right now, the zoning is agricultural, or the zoning is R3.5?
No, so the zoning, in terms of what they're allowed to do today with the land, is R3.5. And so the distinction, sometimes this is this can be complicated by sometimes the public doesn't understand, so we'll explain it quickly. Is that the land use map, the future land use map, which was done in 14, says that essentially this, as the town, based on the council and the public on the adopted plan, this is what we would like to see this property developed as in the future, regardless of what the current zoning is. But when push comes to shove, the zoning, the current zoning always supersedes the comprehensive plan. It's really only when you're looking at rezoning the property that you go back to the plan and say, what are we showing for how this area should or should not be developed?
Other questions for Adam?
open space, does that include the retention bond? I assume they would be able to get an absolute site retention bond on 6% open space if they wanted it 3 months.
Yes, yes, the open space calculations are pretty, in terms of the way they've calculated, there's nothing unique in terms of how they calculated it. It's a question that comes up a lot. It's the same methodology for calculating open space, across the board. So their numbers are showing 29%, which is just basically the amount of acres that they have and the amount of plots that they're looking at for that.
One of the concerns is traffic. I don't think anything, is there any plans, traffic improvements on 200 West? Part of this, it looks like based on the site plan, it's just an entrance, just an access point.
Yes, so we felt that it was premature to solidify it in the PUD since it's a zoning document. However, the tentative plan at this point, in speaking with the developer, working with the town manager, is to, consistent with the thoroughfare plan for 200 West. By the way, the thoroughfare plan is showing 1 lane in each direction with the center 2-way left turn lane. And so, tentatively, what the plan would be to widen 200 West on the east side, basically the area going northbound, so that the turn lane, there'd be a 2-way left turn lane into the project. And then additionally, there might be some opportunities in that corridor where the left turn pocket won't be needed. So we'll look to put in a landscape median there. So that's kind of the tentative working plan.
Is that
for access.
Is that expected to be, those costs are expected to be borne by the town or?
No, all by the developer.
Okay.
Is there enough room to put a turn lane in there? Because that area, if you look at it on the satellite map, the road narrows there just south of North 200. And it looks like if you were to expand that to add a turn lane, you might have to tear out that brand new walking path.
No, everything has been sized in terms of what the future right-of-way leads are and where the path is. So the path was placed at the back edge of the right-of-way, the future right-of-way. And to the extent that, not getting into that level of detail at this moment, but to the extent that if the path were if they need to make adjustments to the path, again, that would be fully borne on the developer to do that, if that were to happen. I don't think it's going to be a situation, but we'll definitely keep that in mind if the project were to be.
Just looking at this, looking at the north, is that an access road for the neighborhood going? And will that tie down into that?
Yes, so the substreet that you see there would be a connection point to the neighbor in the county. The main reason for doing it is to provide almost secondary access to the area, especially for emergency response, things of that nature. And we've reached out to the Hancock County Highway Department, the director, to see what his thoughts were on that, and he supported it as well from an emergency response perspective. The only comment that he had at this point is that there's a potential that they may have to do a mill and overlay on North Vernon Lane and on the drive east of the intersection. If that pavement is not sufficient, although that road is recently repaved by the county, so whether or not that would be necessary is still an open question. But the minimum, the county highway director does want the developer to widen the intersection at Orchard and Vernon Lane to make it accessible for buses and sort of fire apparatus.
Well, and that leads into my question. I saw both of those where they're talking about putting these entrances. And it doesn't look like there's enough right of way in them to have traffic in both directions. So those would have to be expanded. Now, it looks like on the,
Are you referring to,
the North Vernon Road and then that, I'm guessing that's what, an easement on New North 200?
no, so, a couple of things. So first, the, access point going out to 200 west.
Yeah.
That is, I want to say 55 feet wide. We've analyzed it, I don't recall, what that is. The developer probably knows, what that dimensions exactly. That's actually fee simple land that is owned by the developer. It does not exist in.
Okay.
So there is, ample room to be able to put in a street sidewalk. As part of it, and again, when the developer would have to say a few words, I know that they met with both of those property owners, and I think, as we would expect, that at a minimum, they would put in an apron approach to those two driveways that are there. The second item, in terms of the street going up to the north, is, again, in speaking to the highway director, he didn't have any issues with having connection to that road. There's no doubt that the pavement there on that road is narrow. I think it's maybe 17 feet, that when we went out and measured it. And so that was,
Looking at possibly we be looking at for traffic going through that neighborhood. Up there.
what type of capacity? Well, I think, I would say that the intent is that the vast majority of the residents would use the main entrance out of 200, but there would be connection to that.
Is there a way to guess really who's gonna use which one? If I lived in there, I would use the main one. I wouldn't want to drive through the neighborhood, the other neighborhood, but unless there was blockage at the main entrance for some reason.
So has the county talked to the people along North Vernon about having to heat into their yards to expand that road? No.
No.
Well, the road, the widening, couple things, is the roadways are not projected to be widened. The only thing that would be widened would be the intersection.
Because I drove my Traverse down there last night.
And
and I was having trouble.
the intersection would be, the widening of the intersection would be within existing right of way, which is quite a bit of right of way here, the intersection, so. Again, I would say, at least from the town's perspective, is it's not in our jurisdiction, it's really up to the county as to what they want to do. There are a couple different trade-offs if that road were to be widened. Number one, it's the one advantage of having a narrower street is that if the street were to be widened quite a bit, you could have people that speed. So there is a bit of a traffic calming nature of that. Secondly, there's some beautiful trees that are along the side that would probably have to be taken out for that. And then the question is, what's the extent of the additional infrastructure that's in? Is there funds to put in, or put on the sidewalk, whatever that is, it's, but that I would say from the town's perspective, would be, staff perspective would be amenable to a number of different scenarios, but ultimately it's the county road and stuff like that as to what they want to do.
Just for clarification, the county is not planning to widen their potential structural repair of the existing facilities on a mill overlay.
And that would be borne by the developer.
Oh, that's paid for, okay.
The developer, yeah,
They
the county would not pay for any improvements.
So no anticipated widening, it would actually improve roadway network through the pavement.
Correct. To the extent that the pavement needs to be replaced, the balance.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
Any other questions for Ed? That will bring up, the way this works, so everybody understands, we're gonna bring the petitioner up, which is the developer. They get to speak their piece, and say what they need to say. please pay attention to what they're saying. If they answer your question or one of your questions has been answered, and if there's a lot of people here, I want everybody to get a chance to speak, but we're gonna be limited on time. So please have your thoughts formulated in your head, and then if you hear someone else speak to that, please don't repeat that question. But as a developer in house, you would please approach the microphone, state your name, who you represent.
For the record, my name is Paul Clare with Pyatt Builders. With me tonight is Todd Pyatt, owner and president of Pyatt Builders, as well as Scott Cushman, who is the owner of the property currently. So Adam's done a great job outlining the project and the standards that we're proposing. As he stated, the standards that are included in this proposed PUD is pretty stringent. Between Todd and I, we've probably worked in every city or town in the metropolitan area, all the different counties. And these are some of the more stringent standards in any of the cities or towns that we work. As far as the project goes, it's going to be a lot more detailed. If this moves forward through zoning, the next step is going to be a primary plat. At the time of primary plat, there'll be a whole lot more engineering level details put together. It won't be the plan that we build off of, but it's going to put together more and more details as we move forward. It'll answer questions like how the sewer and the drainage is going to work, how the water lines are going to come in, how the street connections, and all of that level of detail will start to come out in primary plat if it moves forward. I do want to circle back. I mentioned this at the previous town council meeting. This property has been in the Cushman family for nearly 200 years. Thomas Cushman and his wife Elizabeth came over to the States back in 1838. And he settled in Pennsylvania, but a few years later, 1838 is when he moved to the Fortville area. So the Cushman family has been in this area since 1838. It's been handed down through generations, 8 generations of family members that own this. And there was one family member, Harvey Cushman, had a daughter, Nellie, and he actually is the granddaughter. He's not a daughter-in-law, but she's the granddaughter of Cephas Fort, who is the founder of the Fortville town and did the original plat for Fortville. So I found that very interesting that there's a connection to the history of the town, and that this property has been in the same family for nearly 200 years. So I just wanted to point that out. So as far as the details of the project, that Adam covered most of those details. I did meet with the 2 property owners on either side of the entrance. I'll let them speak to how that went. I thought it went fine. There was no determination of what the outcome was, but it was civil, and I appreciate the opportunity to meet with them. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
So any questions for Paul? Paul, that does not mean you're off the hook.
Yeah, I've been through these before. That's fine.
So you can have a seat, but we'll. Okay. As a reminder, please silence your phones if you haven't already. So in the interest of time and fairness to everyone, I want everyone to get a chance to speak. Please do not repeat a comment or a question that's been announced before. And please have your thoughts organized as you approach the microphone. Everybody gets a little nervous. We all do, it's okay, but I'm gonna start with the 2 property owners that are on either side of that entry. I assume they're both here?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't care who goes first, but please, as you approach the microphone, state your name and your address.
How will the committee get it inside?
Didn't I just ask that?
You did, and you flew right over.
Oh, did I? You jump on. I apologize. Do we have any questions for the vote?
So in your, in the PUD here, it's talking about using slight and hydro seeding instead of a front yard sod. Having had personal experience with that over in Windstone, if there gonna be any contingency made if that seed does not plant?
Actually, I'm actually a little bit surprised. That may have been in the template. I don't remember, but we generally do sod front yards. So I'm a little surprised that that's in there, if it's in there as an oversight. We wouldn't do, hydro seed or, slice seed front yards. That might be backyards, but not the front. Front would be sod.
If you guys were to develop this area, you probably, what would you do with the top soil that's there now? Would that be replaced once you put the yards in? Because that would affect how the sod grow.
We would, typically what we do is we try to stockpile as much topsoil as we can. We'll use some of that in the backyards and the front yards, actually is what we do. So, if we have enough, we'll stockpile a little bit extra, in an area where us as the builder can use it to backfill yards as necessary for that purpose.
How much do you backfill with topsoil? Because the topsoil is filled with a lot of organic material, so as it decomposes in there, it causes a lot of settling, and you can get large variations as that soil settles, and can cause a lot of unevenness in yards.
Most of the time it's 3 to 4 inches is what is recommended.
So we're not looking at like feet.
No.
Sorry. Where is the play structure anticipated to go?
It'll be in either the southwest corner or the northwest corner. There's a path, you see on the plan, the path goes, it wraps all the way around the pond, so I'm thinking that's probably gonna be the northeast corner. The little area there that we put the playground.
I'm looking at this and I just wanted to ask, were there no other alternatives or options for having entryways in the neighborhood?
But at this point in time, no, that was just the
one.
be simple that went out, plus the public road connection to the north.
Okay.
Any other questions? Any other questions? Sure, I'm doing the job right. I'm not real good. Thank you, Rebecca. One of the two properties, sir.
Hi, my name is Lucas Schultz. I live at 8688 North 200 West, which is the property just north of the proposed main entrance. My wife says I tend to over-explain, but I got this down to 5 minutes. I have several concerns here. Daily traffic. We're looking at 97 homes. We estimate, two cars per home. That's 200 vehicles going to be using these entrances, especially the main drive. Most divisions that I've seen have ingress and egress points out to 2 different roads. The one that was mentioned across the street goes out to 200, but it also goes out to Fortville Pike. So there's definitely more options. But this proposed neighborhood, all of this traffic would fall out right to 200 West. During high traffic times, schools letting in and out, traffic already can back up to the north, Mount Vernon North entrance. My wife and I have some pictures and videos to reference if anybody wanted to see those. My personal concern would be that traffic, is going to back up on 200, it's also gonna back up onto the main entrance, and there's gonna be times when myself and my wife, and my neighbors aren't even gonna be able to get out of their driveway. The increased traffic brings up safety concerns. To me, obviously, the more traffic there is, the more risk or potential there is for incidents with pedestrians or people utilizing the walking path. I think the new crosswalk that went up definitely is helpful, but it's only going to compound the slow stop traffic issue on 200 West as a result from neighborhoods going in. My personal experience, I drive a work vehicle every day. I do a lot of driving, and vehicles that tend to have been slowed or stopped, once they're then freed, they usually step speed quite a bit to compensate for their lost time. My personal concern also is my driveway, my garage feeding onto this main entrance. Somebody turning off 200 into this entrance, I could be backing out of my garage, pulling out of my driveway when it's clear, but depending on the speed at which they take this turn onto the main drive, there's a potential collision right there on their main entrance. Briefly speaking to the aesthetic of the neighborhood going in here and the benefits to the town, most of the neighborhoods I've seen, their main entrance has a 60 to 90 feet from back of sidewalk to back of sidewalk. Again, I have some pictures and aerial photos that I can reference at some point if anybody wants to see them. Most main drives don't have driveways right at the beginning on their main entrance. This one's going to have 3. Most entrances have a really nice model home right up front, and they showcase the quality of the homes. This does not have that. Most entrances don't have private property within 10 feet of their main entrance, sidewalks, drives, and most of them don't have structures that close to their main entrance. Things like garages and barns and sheds. Really quick, I wanted to touch one of the slides that Adam brought up there, talking about roads. Mentioned a 55-foot road with 7.5 feet grass area and 5 feet sidewalk. This area in between my property and my neighbors to the south, according to the survey that was submitted with this proposal, this section is only 50 feet wide. So 55 feet is not going to be accurate for that slide that was referenced. Adam also mentioned that this neighborhood is going to be adjacent to a new PUD neighborhood. I don't know if that's technically true because there are row of houses that are between those neighborhoods that are not part of that PUD. As elected officials, we make decisions on what's best for the town. And I think putting as many houses in as we can in a certain amount of space, is not always what's best for the town. Adding more homes just so we can add more taxpayers is not always what's best for the town. We have to consider the infrastructure to support the extra taxpayers and if it can. As elected officials, we represent the residents of Fortville, and I think as a resident for over 30 years, I think if you talk to some of the long-time residents, they'd be opposed to any PUD neighborhoods going up, but they would be especially opposed to ones that would appear to be crammed in behind houses that have stood in the community for over 50 years. And that's my 5 minutes. I thank you all for your time.
Quick question, do you live on the north or the south of this entrance?
I live on the north.
Very well spoken, young man. I appreciate your time. I will correct you on one thing. We are not elected. We are appointed. You're appointed to my service. It's someone else's fault that we're here. They are elected.
My name is Audra McFarland. This is my husband, Rick. We live at 8652 North 200 West, which is on the south side of that drive. First, I just wanted to mention that until July of this year, we have always been told that we owned this gravel drive. A company called Beacon that maintains the website that shows property ownership in the state of Indiana has said for years that we own this drive. That website has always shown it. In addition, both of us have been to county offices in the past 4 years even 10 years ago, and given information from the county that showed that we jointly owned the drive. When the builder first presented this proposal last month, everyone that I know of, including attorneys, the town police, and town council members, neighbors, everyone was looking at Beacon, and everyone thought that we owned it. And nobody ever knew that that was wrong until July 21st, when all of a sudden Beacon got changed. And then we became aware that we didn't own it. So although it should have been our responsibility to know our property lines, we have always been misled, sadly. So now we know that 50 years ago, when Ralph Cushman sold off this frontage land for homes, he did save 50 feet of gravel space for the access of the field. That was basically the point. This development proposes to use that 50 feet as their main entrance. That is all they have to work with. The actual entrance road, they are saying, is going to be 29 feet from curb to curb, because they are required to put 10 feet on each side, 5 for sidewalk on each side, 5 for a grassy area. As a comparison, we have measured, and the main entrance at Mount Vernon North is 65 feet from curb to curb. It has a nice median, it has landscaping, a pretty sign, it all looks great. Their secondary entrance is 40 feet from curb to curb. There's no median, but it's 40 feet. You're looking at the main entrance to this development being 11 feet narrower than Mount Vernon North's secondary entrance. So I just want to make that point. They will have to put their water lines, their sewer lines, their lights, their signage, everything will run down that 50 feet. That's all they have. When we asked Mr. Clare a couple weeks ago, we met with him, and when we asked him what he thought of this, his honest answer was, it's not ideal, but it's adequate. My question to you is, do we really want adequate? Because that road will only be 29 feet, it will not allow for a turn lane. It will not allow for people waiting to turn left out without blocking traffic. It will not allow for a right turn lane so that other people can get around a car that's waiting to turn left. It will back up into the neighborhood. In addition, every single bit of building equipment that's used for this neighborhood has already been mentioned. It won't go down Orchard Lane and Vernon Lane. It will all go through this 50-foot access. Every trestle, every piece of equipment, everything, every crane, everything, concrete has to go through that 50 feet. We just wanted to point out that when they do put this in, the sidewalks will be there that 5 feet outside of the 29-foot street. Those sidewalks are going to be within 6 feet of both of our outbuildings, a garage with an overhead door and a barn with overhead doors. So when we are backing out, we would be right up into that traffic in no time. We did take a couple of pictures today to show, if you'll pass that, it goes over there, to show you where that line will be in relation to our outbuilding and the garage house. And basically, we won't even be able to park a vehicle in front of our barn in their garage. The sidewalk will be within 6 feet. On a personal note, we have a handicapped son. He will live with us his entire life. He is mentally and physically disabled, and he's fully dependent on us as his caregivers. When we moved into this house 11 years ago, we thought it was the perfect setting for him. We frequently have him out on the driveway. We play ball. He sits out there and watches us mow the yard. And it has been ideal because we had a buffer from the traffic on the road. If this drive goes through as their main entrance, not only will we lose the gravel drive buffer from the traffic, we will also lose 5 feet of our concrete drive. In addition, during the phase where they're putting in the sewer lines, Mr. Clare says that they will have to run a trench down the center of this gravel drive, and it will render that drive unusable. He told us they have not discussed an alternative plan, but he estimates that we would likely have to have a temporary gravel drive, each of us, through our yards for as much as 9 to 12 months. If that happens, we stand to lose significant accessibility for our son's wheelchair, his ramp that has low ground clearance, and the ability to swing into our garage so that he can be unloaded in and out without being in the rain and the snow during bad seasons. Just want to also point out that the town has implemented their PUD guidelines to make their neighborhoods look nice. No vinyl siding, minimum lot sizes, chair back curbs. They use all of that to control how the neighborhoods look. What we need to know is that you care about how this looks, and it is not going to look good when you have this skinny little road going out there. There won't be room for flare outs. There won't be room for any of that. It's likely to cause a traffic nightmare. And in the long run, the landowner and the developer, they aren't gonna be affected by this. They aren't gonna be affected by how it looks or how it affects this community. We, the community, are definitely gonna be affected by it. And we hope that you guys will take that all into consideration. Thank you.
Any questions for us?
When they're constructing the drive in front of your property, you lose access to your drive.
That's what we were told, because they would run a trench right down the center of the gravel, and then we wouldn't be able to get to the concrete pad that is our actual driveway.
Aren't there two sets of houses along there?
Yeah.
Luke has
There's a place, I know that there's a place that sells the sweet corn.
That's us.
And then there was
Yeah.
a house right behind there.
No, that's, behind the house is a pole barn.
Okay.
That sits right out close to the drive.
Yeah, there's just one property on the
Yes.
south side, which is us. I have a detached garage and a house. Two drives, one for each of those drives. One attached to the house and then one back behind the trees, detached from the house.
Where would they put your gravel?
Well,
Question.
that's a good question. It looks, I don't think there's enough room when you look at the
We
property.
don't know where they would put it. He
Well,
said they haven't really thought about that yet.
We'll let Paul address
But they
that when
would
he
just
comes
have
back
to.
up. Thank you.
I just got one quick clarification. So both of you, your drives down out onto the
The
gravel.
gravel drive.
Exactly.
And we have no other access.
I've been there for 11 years and like she said, we just always thought it was our driveway. We had shell shock.
Right. So what is they can call it, an easement, or is it,
It's their property.
It's actually owned by.
It is
Yeah,
their property.
it's owned by the- apparently.
okay.
That's too simple, but
It is the easement, and the Cushman to get him, they owned it that one, okay,
They owned it all along.
right.
Not that they
I'm just trying to wrap my head around that.
If I could just add one thing, we as a community in Fortville, I think, we obviously know there's a lot of development going on in the county and around the Vernon Township area. Out by Fortville, there's homes going up everywhere. And me being a farmer, I've lost a lot of farm ground to development. So I know this, but I just think we ought to be mindful of the fact that we're gonna have growth. And as long as we have growth, the school system's gonna have to grow. And I think to just continue to populate people and traffic on that corridor from town to the school property doesn't make a lot of sense. I think we ought to be cautious about what we do and make room for the school's growth needs.
I'm familiar with that. The school did buy my property. Just one thing. Okay, anything else for? Okay. We might holler back at you, so
Sure.
be ready.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I don't want to be, again, I want to be fair to everyone, so I wanted to hear from primarily these two property owners. I want to hear from everyone. But not everyone in this room can have 5 minutes. So please just raise your hand and step to microphones, speak your name and your address, and just take a couple minutes.
I'm on the north side.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Lisa Stone, and I live at 8779 North Vernon Lane. And it is the property, on the east and north side of the development. The east side of Vernon Lane. I moved there in August of last year. My son owns it with me, and he moved in about 3 weeks ago. We're changing his lifestyle, his work. He owns properties in Rodville, and he has gotten rid of those, and so he's currently staying with me here. We own the house and the property together. We like the large open backyard, the cornfields along it, and the quiet privacy and safety of living on a street without an outlet. It was a major part of our decision to purchase our home. Both Orchard Drive and Vernon Lane have very few houses. Vernon Lane has only 4 houses on it. This street extension, our street, by the way, I measured it in front of my house, is 15 feet 4 inches, not 17. 15 feet 4 inches. You can barely get 2 cars past each other on it. This street extension will greatly decrease our safety and security of our property. The development, Cushman Farms, we feel and hope, should make a second entrance to the south or west where land is available for purchase. Our properties, unlike the developments, are not within Fortville city limits. Our streets and properties are Hancock County properties and are under their jurisdiction. If Vernon Lane is extended, there are an estimated 71 plots of the 97 west of Vernon and only 25 lots east of Vernon Lane. This throws the possibility of most of the traffic on our narrow street. Like I said, barely 2 cars can pass now. We rarely pass our neighbors. You know, we just don't see them that often. A new street would be needed for the traffic. If a new street is installed, we probably should be compensated for if they need land from us. And if city water and sewers are placed at the street or under Orchard and Vernon Lane, we would hope that storm drains would be attached to the sewers to prevent flooding in our properties. We would also request that properties along these lines could request to be in Fortville city limits and that hookup to them be at minimal cost for property owners who wish hookups. We're almost all on septic and well water. And most of my neighbors, they love it and that's what they want. We would like to hook up to the city, and if that does happen, we hope that we'll be able to. Regarding the design of Cushman Farms, we appreciate the larger lots on the east and north side. There still will be three homes bordering our lot. We just got nice little trees there. But there's 3 lots along our property. The inner homes seem to also be too dense and unvarying. There need to be some green spaces in the middle of the area. The developer touts the extensive green space, but it is all to the west end along the creek. Space that is probably less buildable anyway. Also, there is some flooding in the field. I'm not real familiar with it, like I said, because I've only been there, and we have had flooding in our yard. For some of us on the north and east border, we would like to have a high fence and or a 4-foot mound with trees and shrubs along the north and east borders of the development. We understand the planners expect the builders to put in homes close to those across in North Mount Vernon North. We definitely would like to see similar values to keep our property values. We are close to Mount Vernon schools, and that resource alone should make the site of good value. Thank you.
Remind me your name, ma'am. What was your name?
Lisa Stone.
Lisa, thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful comments, Lisa, thank you. Keep in mind that this body does not have a say in what happens in the community north of this development. That's on the county. So while I understand and respect what you're saying and requesting, if this project moves forward, please understand at this point, it's not our call. So we'll continue to hear from the public, but keep those things in mind. So who else wants to?
Crouch. I live at 1653 West State Road 230.
What was your name?
Here at Crouch.
Okay.
I live exactly right out across the street from this drive that is going to be exiting onto 234. My question is, Is that, are you lowering the speed limit there on 234, because it is 55?
On 234.
Yeah.
Oh, you're talking.
I'm talking about the
You're on
little
Mount Vernon
private.
School. You're on the Mount Vernon School.
Right.
Yeah, this.
That's next. As my mom said, patience, Prudence. Anyone else regarding the Cushman development? Okay, so we'll take a question. Oh,
I don't know you guys.
No. Hi, my name is Janet Collins, and I live at 2109 West Orchard Drive. So we would be that name, and we live at the corner of Vernon. So we're right there at the corner of Vernon and Orchard. And we're concerned, basically, they've already said the concerns on Vernon Drive, but we're also concerned about the conditions on Orchard Drive. Because I believe the traffic is going to come down Orchard Drive. Just because they're talking about all of the backups from the school system, so most people are not going to try to get into that middle. They're going to try to go out Orchard Drive, which is going to create a lot of traffic that way. There's a stop sign there at Orchard and Vernon, which concerns me because I'm afraid if the traffic comes down through there, we're going to have a lot of people run the stop sign because we know it happens. And I do have grandchildren that come out there and play, and I taught them to stop at the stop sign. So they're learning that, so I just don't want that issue to be with them. But I do feel like Orchard Drive is not much wider than what Vernon is, to where two vehicles can get down there at the same time, the school bus, trash service, or anything like that. And the other question is I have, how would you stop the construction traffic from going down Vernon Drive?
yeah, we'll address that.
Okay.
Anybody else before I move too quickly? Okay, with no one else, I'll invite Paul back up.
Okay, I guess I'll start with, the entrance road. That is the design that's there. I'm not sure what was going on with Beacon. I can't speak to why Beacon showed what they showed, but when they took title to their property, they took title to a description that described their property without this 50-foot strip. So, I know that most homeowners, and I'm a homeowner, we don't necessarily, I do this for a living, so I do it, but most homeowners don't read those legal descriptions that are attached to the deeds. But it is a description that specifically describes an area, and those areas did not include this 50-foot strip. As far as the access goes, Adam talked about what improvements would be done along County Road 200. We talked about that. Again, those are typically things that are taken care of at the primary plat, but I knew going into this meeting that they would come up, so that's a fair assessment. As far as the idea of the utilities coming through there, we have to bring the utilities through there. I shared with them that under normal circumstances, the utilities are trenched in. May not be able to do that here. Well, as a matter of fact, it probably won't be able to do it. I've thought about how to maintain access for them during that period of time, and likely opening a sewer trench and water trench isn't going to work very well. So that means that we probably have to bore those utilities through there. As far as that goes, that it would also be able to provide connection for them if they decide to want to have sewer and water. As far as sewer and water to the north, we're going to be bringing sewer and water into the site from the east side of the road. If at some point in time, there's an opportunity for sewer and water to be extended into the Alfred subdivision to the north, that can happen. That wouldn't be anything that we would have a say in. That would go through the town, Public Works Department and the town. As far as the comment about drainage, again, that is something that is looked at very specifically through the technical review. All the drainage will be collected and taken to the detention pond and ultimately outletted to the creek. Street widths within the Alfred subdivision. The comment was made that there's most of the homes are west of that stuff to the north, but yet I don't think most of those homes on the two southern drives are going to get to go all the way around and then go out to the north and then onto 200. They're going to go out. So that's just yes, I don't know why they would drive all the way around. So again, people are going to find the best way for them to go when they go to work, to go to shop, or to whatever they do. They're going to find their way in and out. There was a discussion about a fence along the common property line between one or some of the lots to the north. We're proposing a landscape buffer, but if this body decides the fence is the better way to go, that's an option that we can look at. Me personally, from a planning perspective, you put fences around every neighborhood in the community, kind of isolates all of these individual subdivisions, creates less of an opportunity for people to engage, but I understand the circumstances. So, again, that's something that's open for discussion, whether it's a fence or whether it's landscape buffer. I tend to lean towards soft buffer versus a harder buffer like fence. Construction equipment and supplies, we have to come in somewhere. Coming through our entrance is the best way. That's only a given amount of time. Once the homes are built, then that is not a concern. I understand it will for a few years, but short of some other opportunity, that's the way the construction equipment and supplies will finish.
You're talking about through the main entrance.
Main entrance, yeah.
The question was how do you stop it from going down?
Yes, we talked about it, and that's actually part of the PUD. We would sign, at least temporarily sign, put signs in the Alfred subdivision of no construction traffic in and out of that subdivision. And we can enforce that with our vendors. We have done that in other communities, and we would do that here as well. As far as models go, I think it was mentioned that we have nowhere to put a model. We have 90 some lots we could put a model on, and we would intend to likely have a model at this location. It would probably be, as you come in, it would probably be on the left or right side of the entrance road coming in past the existing homes. So there is opportunity for a model home to be able to build in the neighborhood. Just checking my notes, I try to catch everything. I think that addresses most of the comments. If I missed anything, there was a comment about green space. The green space talked about putting full green spaces throughout the community. Fine, but that's unusable. We created the green space and provided the over a half a mile of walking trails through that green space that provides, in addition to the park ground or playground that we put in, we provide an additional level of activity for homeowners. So we do have a few spots of open space coming in, but primarily we wanted to utilize the area where the walking path will have our active open space. If I've missed anything, remind me, no.
Is there any new questions from the committee? Yeah.
So I'm a pretty active member in the community. I have kids that 3 hours before school over there, so I drive over there several times a day. And I've seen and been in the many car queues that do build up over there. Has there been any traffic studies to determine the level of service at peak hours? In this area, and how an additional 200 cars would affect the queuing
I would,
in the area?
there hasn't been, and typically the size, the smaller, this is a smaller subdivision, there, at this size, traffic study is not warranted. But you also, I would ask Adam or others, if there was a traffic study done for Mount Vernon North. That one has 2.5 times the number of homes that we have, and I don't know if there's a traffic study done for that. That is 240, 260.
That would include Mount Vernon more traffic when that was. There was one done.
Did the developer do a traffic study at that time for their project? Okay.
And since the new school is coming in, adding new traffic.
With another access on 200 West.
Yeah, okay. All right, so I'm looking here at the yellow outline, for Cushman Farm parcel that's to be proposed. And I'm assuming that there's a creek on the west and the south side, is that what that is? I am listening to the access point. I think that there's another parcel here that goes out to 200. Has there been any consideration to increase, or is that land even available?
I'm not under, I don't have that property within my, no, I do not have that under contract. I'm not exploring that property at this time.
Okay, well, that was my question.
The buffer for the north and the west or the east, are these are landscape buffers that have any height, or is it just?
It's just ground level. I tend not to want to do mounding in those locations because it creates drainage issues for them as well as us. So I tend to, again, use soft landscaping, which is trees and shrubs and so on.
I have one more. So when you had the survey done, that lane or that parcel that goes back in there, you said it's 50 foot, is that what they, the survey came up with?
Survey shows.
And on the paperwork, it looks like you need 55. How are you gonna propose to make up a 5 foot difference?
The internal streets are 55 foot right away.
The internal, which
The
the
internal
lane is.
Your entry is 50, but the
My
street
entry is 50, but everything beyond that
55.
would be.
Okay. Just trying to understand.
Anything else from the committee? I did be glad to give the opportunity to any elected officials in the audience to come up and make a comment or statement or ask questions. If there, I know we have a few in the audience. Would anyone like to speak?
I have a question. Becky Davis, and I'm on the town council, and I'm just curious, will that pond have a fence around it? No.
No.
No, no municipality that I.
You don't know fees that will be.
Typically, they're minimum APP. But they have safety levees built around them at the water level, so if somebody happens to stumble next to it, it keeps them from falling into it. It's very typical of all subdivisions that we deal with most municipalities. No offense, but
Thank you. Any other questions? Comments? So at this point, the responsibility of this committee is to make a positive recommendation as suggested, no recommendation, or a negative recommendation.
I just wanted to chime in on the road situation.
Oh, yeah.
with Panhandle. So the intent would be that the roadway itself would still be 29 feet back curb, so it match the rest. What would probably happen when we run into these situations from time to time is that, potentially the landscape strip on both sides of the street will be narrower. But don't forget, the 55 feet of right of way includes a fairly wide landscape strip, which developers can kind of but the nice thing about it is it can still work if that strip goes away or it's significantly reduced. So I might have to go back a bit.
Okay.
Scott, can you make motions before we go to that?
Before we go to what?
Before we make the recommendation?
Well, the motion is you make a motion to just say what you want our recommendation to be. If there is a second, then there is discussion about that motion and then it's voted on. If there is a motion with no second, then
I meant prior to the actual,
can we have discussion prior to a motion?
well, no. I motion that we change the wording under front yard lawn, under the proposed PUD standards to remove hydro seed and slight seed for the development counter.
We could make that recommendation part of the motion.
Okay, maybe it is.
Sorry. Now I'm with you. So, looking for a motion.
I motion for a negative recommendation on the PUD.
We have a motion for a negative recommendation on the Cushman property. Case 03 RD 2022. Is there a second?
I second.
We have a motion and a second for a negative recommendation for case number 03 RZ 2022. Any discussion? Yes, I have some discussion.
I have concerns about emergency traffic getting in and out during peak rush hour and just during the day. I have concerns about traffic, in and out. I have concerns about how this will affect the community.
Adam did address the emergency vehicle consideration that they want for the county engineer.
Well, I mean, my concerns are about the buildup, about just how many cars will be backed up at different times of the day, blocking emergency vehicles that come down 200 West. I mean, there have been many times where I have to go over throughout the day and I have to sit on 200 West for several minutes to get over to the schools.
So that's something that I think definitely warrants conversation. I think that warrants conversation on the next case. A lot of that is the condition that as a result of school that would render this property useless to anybody, right? If it's not addressed at source, which is school.
And I'll chime in with this part. I don't have a lot of concerns with the interior part of the property as far as development goes. My concerns are the fact that this is bumped up against the existing houses along 200 West and over on
Orchard and North Vernon Lane. And we're taking this entire neighborhood, this entire new neighborhood, and basically, for lack of a better term, forcing ingress and egress to these populated areas.
I would agree.
It really, like, that seems like the part that doesn't belong here. The rest of it, like, I don't see any issues with the internal development. I see issues with the fact that it feels like we're really forcing ingress and egress in this neighborhood to basically the worst parts of the surrounding property.
I think that, where we're trying to put the entrance into the neighborhood just doesn't fit. It's basically forcing it. I have no problem with the community itself. I think it's a great community. I feel that it doesn't.
So I guess I would ask you guys to consider that. I was thinking about this as we were talking about it. And this is pretty similar to, maybe it's a little bit bigger, to Park Mall. There's homes on the frontage. There's essentially a single event. There is a secondary, but everybody. And so that, there's the, I guess, a living example of development that has occurred that matches this, where we're kind of set back, where we're not exposed. And I guess I would ask, we're seeing.
I think having been lived on 200 there, I experienced what you're referring to, Brittany, is as far as the traffic, and I'm concerned this is adding to it. I would have been considerably more impressed if this had encompassed the entire Cushman property and allowed an egress out of 900 and 200, gone around a little bit, given some more access points other than through the Alfred addition. I don't see anyone in the audience I've ever put in jail, so I can admit I was on the police department. And tell you that, one major accident right there at that new entry is going to be a major issue, and I can give the law enforcement and first responders a lot of consideration when I look at these things. So I think that's my biggest choke point, is that small drive, small entry, and then to Paul's point, he didn't anticipate a lot of people using the neighborhood, which means reinforces my concern that even more people are going to use that entry. If he's right.
Well, I think they will, simply because if you look here where North Vernon, or where Mount Vernon North is, in the morning, I mean, we can't say how many people are going to move in here that have children, but the fact, given their proximity to the schools, we can say that's going to be a principal selling point. So in the morning, a lot of the traffic turning southbound out of Mount Vernon, or out of Mount Vernon North, is going to encourage people to take the Orchard Drive so that they can turn and go north if they're not going.
And I would say 200 West, yes, it is a problem that can be corrected in the future, but the fact is that it is an existing problem now, and it is a problem for the foreseeable future. And it's not just about the school. It's also about the residents that are all moving in right there on 200. There are multiple neighborhoods that are existing in current development. So it's not just the school, it's not just during school hours. You have commuters who are driving in and out of work in the early morning and returning to their residence in the evening that conflict with school traffic, that all live along 200 right now.
So I think
So we really need another entrance into this neighborhood other than a small main entrance and a very, very tiny secondary entrance.
I think we worked on that part.
Deliberations, just want to give you one reminder, is that for better or worse, whether it's this home builder or whether it's the next one, is if a home builder developer comes in and they want to develop this property under the R3.5 zoning, they would have less lots than what you see here. But if they meet all of the standards of the zoning district and the subdivision control ordinance, regardless of other concerns you may have, about concerns about traffic, drainage, whatever it may be. Under state law, this plan commission is required to approve it. And that would be the final say on it. I'm not saying for this project, but for another subdivision that utilizes our 3.5 zone.
Right.
So,
But that's not where we're at today. I mean, right, we're being asked to make a recommendation on a PUD, correct? If another developer comes along, and I take your point well, I hope everyone else does. If someone else comes along, we may not have the ability to make this recommendation. At that point, it's just, okay. And I get that, but that's not where we're at.
Can I ask, if they came along under that, would that still have to go through the town council at some point? Okay.
But to that point, they would not have access to town water and sewer, correct?
oh, they would. Yes, they would. So they would still be under this hypothetical. They'd still have to go through the public hearing portion of it. But unfortunately, in the planning stage, the ability to make changes is a lot more limited because either they need it or they don't. In terms of what the ordinance states at that point. So it's just something to be aware of. Take it.
It doesn't change my opinion on the entry. I mean, if someone else comes along, I'm gonna say the same thing. I don't care for that 1.5 entry for ingress egress. A lot of these big words. But I learned that word here. So, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on that? Okay, with that, we have a recommendation, a motion for a negative recommendation to the town council for case number 03RZ 2022 Cushman Farms PUD. All those in favor of the negative recommendation, indicate by saying aye. 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 Any opposed? Aye. That is,
Yeah.
yeah. So what Andy will do is, he'll call your name and you say yes or aye or nay.
Jason Snyder.
Nay. Go ahead and say it. Yeah, on the vote, yes. So a vote of aye means you are in favor of the negative recommendation. A vote of aye means you are not in favor of the negative recommendation.
Aye.
Rich?
No.
Aye.
No.
No.
Jason Stein.
Aye.
I mean, is that?
Did you write it down? I didn't write it down, just call it.
Mr. Secretary, it would appear that the negative recommendation is approved, 4-3.
Thank you.
Something's been in my eye.
Okay, so that is it for item number 3, the case number 03RG 2022. Those of you that were here specifically for that, you're free to meander your way out. If you would meander kind of quietly, I'd appreciate that, and have your discussions outside. As we move forward, we'll move forward to new business, which is public hearing for case number 04 SPP 2022, the Mount Vernon master plan.
You want to ride?
All right. So for the next and last case today, is the Mount Vernon School Campus Master Plan. So the applicant, Mount Vernon Community School Corporation, is seeking concept site plan approval and related plans for a campus master plan for improvements on their property east of 200 West and north of State Route 234. And this $84 million project has been reviewed by the school board and has been part of an overall growth plan prepared by the school district to meet the needs of a growing student body. The current Fortville Elementary School on the west side of 200 West would be converted into an intermediate school, and a new Fortville Elementary, about 87,000 square feet, would be built on the east side of 200 West. And they would demolish the current transportation building and the staff health center south of the administration building and replace it with parking. A new transportation center might be, square footage might be off, would be constructed near the northeast corner of the property. And as you see on the plan, they would add new fields for soccer, discus, and shot put. The Board of Zoning Appeals is likely to review variances at the September meeting, possibly technical details related to a type 3 buffer yard, possibly to allow parking lots without curbs as required by the zoning ordinance. May also be something related to chain link fencing. So the zoning on this property is institutional IN, and it's within what's called the corridor overlay since it's along 200 West and State Route 234. And the corridor is defined as 600 feet from the center of those two roadways. So as part of it, there are some enhanced development standards. However, most of them are really directed at commercial development, not institutional. So if you take a look at the aerial photo and parcel map, you can see the area outlined in red. It includes properties that were recently acquired by the school district. Those properties were annexed and rezoned into the town late last year. So if we take a look at the zoning map, that's all been updated to reflect those changes in zoning. Everything in gray is institutional. If we look to the north, there's some more land that's zoned residential 3.5. Off to the east is the Mount Vernon Point subdivision that's zoned residential 1.0 and unincorporated Hancock County. And then off to the south, on the south side of 34, there's some agriculturally zoned properties, again, also unincorporated Hancock County. So we take a look at the concept site plan, landscape plan that was put together. Mainly features a loop road that would be a privately owned driveway that would go around the perimeter more or less of the expanded campus. You can see, zooming in, you can see the new transportation center off on the northeast side of the property. There would be a stormwater detention pond with landscaping. We'll get into a little bit more details on that momentarily. And then this is where the new elementary school would be located. And of course, you can always refer back to these exhibits if necessary. This particular exhibit is just showing the southeast portion of the property where the entrance is being proposed along State Route 234. And then here you can see some modifications would be made to the bus parking area north of the middle school. Here are some of the concept building elevations for the new elementary school. And then here are some elevations for the new transportation center. Also some other renderings of the elementary school. And then in terms of the concept lighting, which is purview of this body, they're simply showing LED lights, parking lot lights, fully shielded. So typical review items on the concept site plan for the zoning ordinance At this point, we'll detail this below, and note the full construction plans would be reviewed by staff and the technical review committee as well. In terms of access, as I mentioned, that private loop drive is intended to be constructed, so there would be access via 200 West and State Road 234. The driveway on 200 West aligns with the newly installed driveway to the intermediate school, which is the current elementary. And new driveways have appropriate distance from the intersection of State Road 234 and 200 West, as far away as possible from those intersections. The driveway near the new elementary school has a long queuing lane to remove car line traffic away from the loop road and the arterial. In terms of the setbacks that would affect this area, on the north side, on the north edge of the property, so that'd be considered a side setback. For the zoning ordinance and institutional zoning, they have to have a 25-foot building setback, plus a 25-foot buffer yard, type 3 buffer yard, so even more detail on that momentarily. So it has to be a 50-foot setback. On the south side, along 234, it's a front setback. They'd have to have a 2-foot building setback, 25-foot buffer yard for 75 feet, so they need that in terms of proximity. On the east side, there'd be a rear setback, that panhandle that I showed you, all that was at the northeast corner. That would have to have a 50-foot building setback, a 25-foot buffer yard, and there's an existing 75-foot drainage easement, which would have to stay clear. So their setback there is 150 feet to the building. And then other areas on the east side would be a 75-foot setback when we look at the actual building setback and the buffer yard. And then lastly, along 200 West, the front setback is a minimum of 50, so no issues there. In terms of the parking ordinance requirements, they have taken into account our parking requirements for the ordinance. And based on the calculation, they have to have 284 spaces for this. They are proposing 287, so they meet that requirement. They're also providing bicycle racks as required by the ordinance as well. Should be noted that per the corridor overlay, 80% of the required parking cannot be between the front facade and the roadway. Not an issue in this case, but that is on the books. In terms of the buffer yards and screening, I want to go in a little bit more detail on that. As I mentioned, along the north, the east, the south property line, they have to have this type 3 buffer yard. And so what that would entail would be, they have to have 2 deciduous plus 2 evergreen trees for 50 feet. The trees, just the evergreens would have to be 8 feet tall. The shrubs, they have to have shrubs along 50% of the length of the boundary. And those shrubs have to be 24 inches tall at planting. And then lastly, they'd have to provide a 3-foot mound and or a 6-foot tall fence, plus 75% of the required plantings outside of the fence. In terms of the lighting, as I mentioned, the parking lot lighting that we pointed downward, they could be LED, maximum 25 feet tall in institutional zoning, so we require that. We would look at that as part of the final construction plans. All the building mounted lighting will have to point downward. Again, we verify that on that construction documents, but no reason to believe that that won't be followed. In terms of drainage, stormwater will flow into 3 different ponds and or dry retention basin before outletting into a county regulated drain. And engineers for the project have consulted with the Hancock County surveyor who is comfortable with the concept plan. That office will need to review and approve the final design in addition to town staff. In terms of architecture, well, I have the drawing up there quickly. It is mostly a brick facade for the new elementary school. The peak of the roof is under the maximum height requirement for IN zoning of 50 feet. We verify that on the construction plans. Transportation center, it is a metal building, there's a masonry base, on the first floor of it. And it would have a pitched roof, so that would meet the architectural standards of that zoning district. And then in terms of the community response to the project, the remonstrance, we're not aware of any known remonstrance. However, public hearing notification items were completed and they exceeded the requirements, as they did in the last case as well. Included mailings to nearby property owners and interested parties. Which we need to include all the owners in Mount Vernon Point, plus all other residential owners in the Mount Vernon School campus. They did a newspaper publication as required, public hearing sign, we put up as required. And we also had them include a rendering of the master plan, which went above and beyond the normal requirements under the law. So, based with the analysis, my recommendation would be to approve the concept site plan, concept landscaping, and the concept building elevation. And I know Dr. Parker is here and our design team. So certainly if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to address those. And also Dr. Parker to also say a few words this evening. Thank you.
Any questions, Brad, from the committee?
I'm gonna ask my regular scheduled traffic question, especially given the previous case, when it comes to traffic, was the traffic, has the traffic impact study been completed, if not? The plans, I know that a lot of the detail comes potentially in the next step, but all I see are access
No,
points.
it has not been, I don't believe it has been provided, or I don't believe it's been completed.
I guess I that asked it because of that.
I certainly wouldn't be opposed to requiring a traffic study or a simple traffic analysis, maybe, if you felt more comfortable with that, and given this, the size and scale of the project, that could be warranted, but
I think just knowing the existing standing queue, you have to understand how this impacts. And some of the drives are gonna be on 234, so as a part of the state review, I know we're gonna require I'm gonna have a quick, we're gonna require a traffic study, but it might make sense to just bundle it up and do it once.
Has Fortville PD offered any input as to how they're gonna position themselves for traffic during the, is not to use the big words again, Scott, but we have, what am I saying, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ingress egress points here instead of what we had previously. And Dr. Parker, do we know what the release time would be on Mount Vernon Intermediate? Would it sync up with the elementary or the middle and high school?
It's not been determined yet, but it would likely sync up with the elementary.
Okay.
But that's a board decision, not mine.
I'm only seeing 5.
Well, unless they're planning to close off the one next to softball and discus fields.
I could probably address several of those questions really good. But I don't know if you want to ask them or let me answer some of them at your call.
If you would.
My name is Jack Parker. I'm the superintendent of Mount Vernon Community School Corporation. Tonight with me, our design team, Manager Plus BB, Mark BB and Bishop Amelia, as well as Greg Wade, who is their sub for context design, which manages site management, does a lot of site management. I want to start off by saying we are highly motivated to make traffic run smoothly. One of the big purposes of this, and we said we're doing 4 things, and one of those things exclusively is site circulation to increase the queues an incredible amount. We've got a lot of success with what we've done at Mount Comfort, what we've done at McCordsville just in the last year to get cars off the road. For us, it's certainly about safety, but also if you can't get them off the road, then you can't get them in and out quickly enough, and it takes too long to get school started. It's partially about functionality of the school. So currently, you talked about, I think it was Mr. Stein, about Fortville Police Department. We consult with them all the time. I can't even imagine how many police officers we use, and we pay for traffic every single day. to manage all of these traffic areas. This would allow us to close some of them off and just direct, for instance, the middle school parents for middle school drop off, what they do next. Anybody a middle school parent or experienced that? Oh my goodness, I call them Shriner circus. It's just, it's crazy. It's like Shriner cars in a parade. We're gonna get rid of all that. That's all going away. Buses and cars separate, cars in one long queue. We'll likely have the cars enter all off of 200, queue all the way around the road, and then access the front of the building and drop off on that big long curve. That is the safest, quickest way to do it. The size of the queue, Greg Wade has actually checked those out for the elementary school and middle school, and they're much larger. I can't remember the numbers. Do you remember off the top of your head?
Right around the elementary school.
Yeah, just for the elementary school. The middle school technically could be hundreds in the queue. So I just want you to know, we are highly motivated to make corrections in traffic because of what I said. And I promise you, that's a big motivation for this main circulation. The other thing I wanted to point out, whoever's running the computer, Adam, would you mind bouncing back to that first slide? Yeah, here, I just want you to know that the things that are outlined in the white dash mark are phase 2 type of things. You know, we need to get our transportation center moved back and all of our buses behind fence to keep them secure. We have them all over the place. We park some at Mount Comfort, some at Cordsville. They need to be parked and secured behind the fence. So we're likely not going to raise that old bus barn and build that parking lot or even that middle school soccer field until phase 2. We will get started with phase 1, which is going to take us a couple of years to get that rolling. But we will do the whole loop road. We'll get that queue fixed for the middle school, and we will have a bus queue that goes all the way around the middle school football field, completely separate from any vehicles. It's going to be so much more efficient. That's kind of the skinny part. I don't know if you want, are there any other features, Mr. Beebe or Mr. Wade, that we could share before they ask any more questions? I think Adam covered most all of it. Most all of it. I mean, you did a really good job. And before I step away from the microphone, I will say that Adam and Joe have been involved in this for several months and in guiding us and helping us along the way. We've had a lot of conversations and we appreciate the partnership. We want to be good neighbors and we want to work well. I'll step back.
Is the preschool still going to be in the Mount Vernon admin building in the middle of them?
That is exactly the plan. The plan is to keep it there. My guess would be the board's going to consider making those facilities a little nicer for them in the next handful of years.
So currently, with middle school car rider, that right there next to the football track and field. So that whole long line right there, gets 4 cars deep, that entire length for a car rider pickup, but yet you're proposing that all of us are gonna queue along that one curve.
It would be easier if I would be allowed to just go.
Go on up. You know, I drive around that curve quite frequently when I leave the office.
I hope you really like
There's
this.
not comparison.
Here's our plan. Here's the front of the line. Cars will drop off here, right side curve out. They can drop off at least 20 cars at a time, probably more. That queue is going to go this way for now. And technically, it can go all the way here.
Okay.
That is a massive single line queue. Now, in the future, when we raise these buildings, we'll likely just move the queue down here. But we will allow people during the start of the day and the end of the day to access this. There's no reason for it. We'll block it off, gate it or something. There's no reason for it. So we'll have cars entering here, exiting here, buses entering here and exiting here because they'll loop this way. For the middle school, for the elementary school, they'll loop this way.
So where's the queue for the elementary school?
The queue for the elementary school, it actually is going to come the opposite direction because it's a different time and they'll jump into here. They can double stack until they get to here and then single stack and they'll have this whole curve to drop off.
Okay.
And That's gonna be a very large queue as well, very
What's
large.
going to happen to the things that are currently outside of the map?
Those are
Right now.
portable classrooms, and those currently are right here. Our middle school is within a few students of being at capacity, and we wanted to decrease their class size. So we actually decreased their class size and added a few more teachers. So we need that capacity until we build this school to pull all the fifth grade out of the elementaries and pull the sixth grade out of this school to go to the intermediate school. We're only adding 2/3 of one grade to this campus by adding the whole school. But it allows us room to grow because the fifth grade's coming out of all three elementaries and the sixth grade's coming out of the middle, which it's gonna make that 2/3 the size and allow room to grow. And then we're gonna have to add on to that in more than a handful of years. Does that
Any
help?
questions for Dr. Parker?
So for the scale on this, how long do you think that these modifications will handle the population growth based on what?
Our future growth plan, which was developed in the 1920 school year with literally hundreds of community members over 7 to 8 months, will allow us to get close to 6,000. But part of our future growth plan also includes an increase in capacity to the high school and an increase in capacity to the middle school within the next 10 years. Once we do that, we will be able to absorb the 2,000 students we originally planned. Right now, we're sitting at 4,500 or 92 students more than we were last year. It's a little bit lower than our typical growth. But we've already delayed the building by a year because we're committed to not doing any construction until we see the whites of their eyes. So we're very future focused.
So we're at about 4,500 now, and within 10 years, we could absorb 6,000.
No, not 6,000, up to 6,000, so 1,500 more. Yeah, our demographic projection was to grow 2,000, and this is from 19, to grow 2,000 in the next 10 years from 19. We are tracking just under that, which is why we delayed this a year. And I can show all that to you. If you guys are interested in it. We have that information.
Any other questions, Dr. Parker? Any other questions for Adam? So we'll open up for public comment. Barry, you're on. This is your time to shine.
I live at 1653 West State Road 234, which would be right across the street from your private loop drive that you're proposing. My question is you don't have any berms or landscaping or anything along 234. And are the buses going to be exiting there at 5:30 in the morning onto 234 on that private loop drive?
So what will happen here, Barry, is you'll ask your question.
Yeah.
And then the appropriate person will come back up and answer all the questions that everyone has at one time.
Okay. And my other question is, are they planning on lowering the speed limit on 234? Because people go 55. So, other question, are they planning on putting in a sidewalk to go down to the subdivision on Fortville Heights? Because a lot of people are walking down to 34.
Anyone else?
Good evening, my name is Dave Strands. I was at 8217 North Mount Vernon Way, that's in Mount Vernon Point, the neighborhood that's just adjacent to the transportation center. My issue is actually very important to my neighbors within Mount Vernon Point. And I just wanted to make sure that you were aware of it and see if you can answer tonight. When the school had an initial meeting, a virtual meeting with the community many months ago, to explain their initial intentions for building the school and the transportation center. The transportation center was located in the same spot even at that time. And I posed the question to the school as to what they will do to be good neighbors to our neighborhood. And one of the things that they brought up that we were really excited about was that the school buses would be designed in a pull-through manner so that the school buses, the headlights would point away from the neighborhood, and they would not need to beep when they back up every day. They would just pull right on through. And so my question today is just to see if the school still intends to be a good neighborhood.
Anyone else? Any of the elected officials wish to ask questions or make comments? Okay, that being none, Dr. Parker, whoever wishes to address.
I will likely need a little bit of help with these answers. I'm wondering if you would allow me to stand here to point for
Oh,
for the first thing, and then I'll go back to your microphone. I'll speak with my teacher voice.
You
Yeah.
got a microphone there.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Currently, there's a bus barn here and a bus parking lot right here. Many buses are entering the roadway at 6:15 in the morning to start their routes. I do imagine that they will be coming from this lot and going this way and or this way. We also have a drain. Right now it's a drain, but we are talking to the landowner of finding some access to Fortville Pike. So we could relieve some of that there, but I don't even know if that's a possibility. It may not happen, but it's something we feel like we should at least have a conversation about. So regarding buses, they will likely be going this way and this way, instead of this way and this way, what they're currently doing. Regarding any berm or thing in this area, I'm gonna have to ask Mr. Wade to address that because I just simply don't know and I don't remember our conversations, Greg.
Greg Wade. Greg Wade on concept design, we're at 5825 Lock East Drive. There will be the required buffer landscape that Adam mentioned, the specific graphic. If you could imagine taking that, or the buffer type 3 that's on County Road 200, pivoting that down, we will be including that in the detailed plans going forward.
Is that about?
There is, it is the landscape or the planting,
So just trees?
trees and shrubs.
And then the one question I think Dave had was the new bus barn, if I understood him correctly, is that a drive-through so they don't have to back up and headlights and beeping?
It certainly is a drive-through, and so the stall sizes and the dimensions of those plus parking stalls allow the drivers to turn their wheels when they park and to pull right on through as they proceed forward, so there will be zero backing up required of those drivers, the same as would occur at the typical drop-off pickup scenarios for safety reasons.
Did we answer everybody's question?
They asked if there's gonna be a sidewalk in the before and about lowering.
Regards to the speed limit of the state highway, as we get into those details, we'll be looking to coordinate with NDOT on those parameters for establishing and maintaining that school zone and those requirements there. I don't know that we're showing the sidewalk connection in the plans currently.
Does that mean you're lowering the speed limit or not?
We don't have your wording on the speed limit. It's not our rule.
But you are
But you're gonna
expanding the school.
You're gonna put traffic out on it, people are going 55 miles an hour. Correct.
We're not putting that much more traffic than we currently have on it. I don't wanna,
No, I'm just
You
saying, you
already
already
have
have buses coming out in the morning at 6:15, you already have school traffic come flying down to 34. Are you gonna have a police officer sitting right there in the middle of the
we have
intersection?
tons of police officers everywhere. I don't know if we will exactly where that will be deployed. I can assure you that this plan is certainly a whole lot better for traffic than what we currently have. It's gonna fix some big problems. It's gonna get cars off the road much more quickly, so that they can be queued on our property and not queued on the road. Then we're gonna deal with our next phase with, when we deal with the high school, we're gonna deal with the high school queue, because it's not very fun either, but that's our next project.
Good question. right now, the school, speed zone, is it just during certain hours or is it the whole entire day? I've been to several school zones in the area.
On 200, it is 25 miles an hour during school hours.
234, it goes from 55 to 45, and that's all the time.
That is correct. But that wasn't our call tonight.
Right.
Right,
Yeah.
I just curious.
Yeah. And I will tell you, there are policemen that patrol those areas very regularly and will pull people over when they're exceeding that.
And some of us made them call their parents.
Yeah.
So in essence, expanding that, your school footprint should, in theory, Adam might be able to, or you, one of you might, should in theory, change the speed limit out further to encompass that 45 and bring it down, right?
But I think that's a logical assumption. Mr. Wade may have a better answer. than this.
I believe that is correct, yes, but so those details, there's a certain distance required.
Right.
Beyond the school's property, even where those postings have to be made for.
To draw down.
So to get to your answer, while we can't change the speed limit, when we change the frontage of the school, the law requires the speed limit to decrease for a longer period of time, a longer run. I think that's what Mr. Meyer and Mr. Wade are saying. That sounds logical to me.
Okay, any other questions? Okay. Members of the
Consideration.
About lighting, is it gonna be on all night? In your parking lots and all that?
I don't know the answer to that. We are hypersensitive to school safety and, I don't like, having part of our property that is dark. Because a lot of people like to be on our property, at night. For whatever reason that may be.
I know, but I don't wanna look at a little parking lot.
Yeah, I understand, but I do also know that many of the lighting that we use, especially in parking lights, do not have a lot of light pollution like the field would. So I know that those are tempered quite a bit and they really don't shine a far distance like football or soccer field. Those do. I mean, I live a mile south and I always know the football field lights.
Well, yeah, and you're gonna put some around the soccer field too, right?
I don't know that we'll have, lights around the soccer field. We might not use the middle school soccer field, in the evening. It's just a middle school soccer field.
The football lights were very bright when I lived on.
Yeah.
They are still.
They are, bright. We understand.
Oh, it's not the park.
Is there any talk about, with all these different entrances along 200 West primarily, is there any talk about some signage to let people know, especially with the new developments that are coming in, to let people know where to turn to get to the various places they need to go?
Absolutely, and new signage will 100% be a part of our plan. We actually, added some signage, just to refresh it, even for this school year to help direct people. But additionally, we pushed out a lot of maps, because of the portable situation that we have. We are directing people to the 200 entrance during the day so that the kids don't have to worry about cars crossing one of the drives. And that's worked out pretty well for us. We just did a little math, like arrow, go here. And parents are seeing to pick up on it very, very quickly. So we'll be great with signage, I promise.
That's all I asked about, because, I have kids in the elementary and then just transitioned from middle to high school. And I always paid attention to my maps for the schools they were in, but every now and then activities would shift them to a different school that I may not have had paid attention to map work. So that's my stupid moment, but it helps.
We'll get your back on that, I promise.
Thank you, Doc.
Arrows are better than ingress and egress. Some of us don't know.
In the room.
Yes. Any other questions? Comments? So with that, I think we can, make a motion to approve all 3 in 1 with coming up, the site plan, the landscape and the building elevation, unless there is a reason not to. So I would look for a motion on case number 04 STP 2022. We are approving or not approving or not. This is not a recommendation.
So if I want to toss a condition on there, though, still do all 3 ones.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I would make a motion to approve the, site plan, landscape plan, and building elevation with the condition that, the site plan reflects any changes, recommendations that are required by the traffic study shall be completed with this project.
I'll start with that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Just give them plenty of time to make sure. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstaining? That is passed. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming in. Motion to adjourn. Huh? Yeah. Oh, you ready to go? Sorry, let's do it. You're at 8:37.
Second.
All in favor, indicate by saying aye.
It's, I really want to hear on that. Mark, you know, writing,